Today it's my great pleasure to be with Bob Kerr. Hello Bob, how are you?
I'm good, and yourself, Myrddyn?
I'm fine, thank you very much Bob. And this is part of the continuing series of interviews with Bob concerning his attempt to reach the highest point on each of the world's 7 continents. And the mountain that we're going to be talking about today, Bob, is...
We're going to talk about Denali, which is also known as Mount McKinley in North America.
Now, a few sort of facts about the hill before we start talking about the ascent itself. How high is it?
Denali is 6,194 metres high, that's about 20,320 feet, so pretty big mountain. It's located about 150 miles north of Anchorage in Alaska at a latitude of about 63 degrees north. With its high latitude, it means that it's effectively like climbing a 7,000 metre peak in the Himalayas, just because there's less atmosphere at those sort of latitudes. The mountain itself, Denali, is also the 3rd most prominent mountain in the world, with Everest and Aconcagua being the 1st and 2nd respectively.
Now, it's a major undertaking, I know from various books that I've read in the past, and also photographs I've seen, and also your photographs. It's a big beast of a hill, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big undertaking, this hill, and to be honest, it scared me a hell of a lot, just sort of thinking about it, and even just getting out there. You know, the scale and magnitude of what you're undertaking really strikes you.
Now, this was the 5th mountain that you attempted within the 7 summits. What ones were 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th leading up to Denali?
Yeah, on the lead up, the first one was Kilimanjaro in Africa, the second one was Aconcagua in South America, third one I did was Elbrus in Europe, and I also did Mont Blanc at a similar time, just for completeness, and then I did Carsten's Pyramid for the highest point in the Australia-Oceania sort of region, and for tidiness I did Kosciuszko just after that. So I went to Denali about 6 or 7 months after I'd been up Kosciuszko.
Now, of course, any one of these mountains, Bob, it's a major undertaking, even just by itself, let alone grouping them together for an attempt on the 7 summits. But what about the preparation for Denali? Any special sort of preparation you had to undertake beforehand?
Denali's a completely different mountain from the other 7 summits that I've done. It's a completely unsupported mountain, and you need good physical strength and stamina to be able to pull off a mountain like this. So I undertook a programme of training to get myself used to carrying heavy weights on the mountain. So I would do things such as carrying big loads up Ben Hope, my local Monroe, and I was routinely going up with 30 kilo loads in my rucksack to the summit, empty out the water that I was carrying, and then nip back down and do it again on another day.
How often did you do that?
I've lost count the amount of times I've been up Ben Hope on load carries. On one occasion I did try to carry over £100 in my backpack, and that was just crippling me. So I lightened the load to about 30 kilos and cruised up the mountain after that.
So what year are we talking about, Bob, that you attempted Denali?
Yeah, it was 2010 that I went out to attempt Denali, and psychologically I'd almost prepared myself. I'm going out to Denali in 2010, I'll see what the mountain's like, and I might have to go back another year. I wasn't underestimating the mountain by any means.
Did you do it through an organised trip?
Yeah, it was an organised expedition I'd booked with Adventure Peaks in the Lake District to sort out all of the logistics for doing Denali. And on this occasion they subcontracted to Mountain Trip, which is an Alaskan-based guiding company. There's only a small number of companies actually allowed to guide on Denali. The Mountain Trip hold one of those licences.
And had you used the company in the lakes beforehand on other trips?
Yeah, I'd used Adventure Peaks previously for my first attempt on Mont Blanc, and also for the Carsten's Pyramid trip, and I've used them after Denali as well.
So as far as the group that had signed up, how many people including yourself?
In terms of us in Alaska, there was 9 people in total as clients, and we had a lead guide and 2 assistant guides, so there was 12 people in the expedition party, so a big group.
So how much gear did you take out, and sort of what kinds of gear as well?
Yeah, I had to take out masses of gear to make sure that I stayed warm in that environment out there, and I had to invest quite a bit of money in new down equipment so I could stay warm out there. Although I'd been to likes of Greenland previously, climbed the highest point in the Arctic, I needed to upgrade my gear because Denali is notorious for being a really cold mountain. So I was buying down salopettes, expedition down jackets, upgrading my thermals, looking at all my kit, making sure that it was in good condition because you don't want any failure out there. And even had to buy a new set of boots, the Mie Everest boots, which are rated down to minus 60 degrees centigrade, and you know, they're really expensive boots, but nice and warm and cosy.
So outside of the food, how much weight are we talking about with all your gear to take out there?
Probably was carrying about 40 kilos or so of personal kit on the planes to head out there. And then on top of that we had the food to go up the mountain and the group kit such as tents and avalanche probes and shovels and a wide range of equipment.
And what about the climbing season for Denali? When is that?
The main climbing season is from mid-April through to about mid-July, with any ascents done in April being very cold. Most people attempt the mountain late May, early June, which is sort of a high season, and there's a reasonably good chance of success in that sort of time period.
And the time that you flew out?
Flew out mid-May, I think it was around about the 13th of May that we flew out to Anchorage, Alaska. And when we got up to Talkeetna region to fly into the launch pad for Denali, there was only about 33% success rate on the mountain for the 2010 season, and there's already been some fatalities on the mountain by the time we got there.
So how many days did you have in Alaska before you then flew out to where base camp was?
We had 2 nights in Anchorage, and then we headed straight up to Talkeetna and flew straight in to the Talkeetna Glacier. And
what height would that be?
So we flew into a height of 2,200 metres roughly, or 7,000 footish, and it's just an amazing flight into Denali. As the plane takes off, you just see this big mountain sitting a couple of thousand metres higher than all the surrounding mountains. It's like, that's a big hill.
And once you landed, what kind of procedures do you then go through before the actual climb starts?
After we arrived at the main glacier, we resorted out our gear. We left a spare cache of food near the landing area, just so we didn't need to carry it all the way up the hill and back down. So when we arrived back at the landing strip, if we had to wait a few days in bad weather, we had some extra food there we could use, so sorted out the kit. And we also just went through general glacier travel with our guides to make sure we knew how to travel safely in that region, and how to tie up our pulks. Well, we were basically using plastic sledges to put quite a lot of our load on, and the sledges were being pulled behind us, but we were also still carrying a lot of weight on our backs. So we had to learn techniques of getting roped into these systems, such that if somebody falls in the crevasse, you can pull them out. And the other new thing for me with Denali was it's the first time I've ever used snowshoes, and we used snowshoes to get up to about 14,000 feet on the mountain.
So what kind of temperature would you be experiencing just down in base camp?
Base camp, it all depends on the weather conditions, but when we were there, it was relatively warm. It was probably only -5, -10 degrees centigrade, so tropical.
And what about acclimatisation treks, Bob, from base camp, or was it just once you started the climb, it was then going up and?
There was no real acclimatisation treks. We acclimatised on the move on the mountain. As I mentioned, on Denali, it's completely unsupported, the mountain, so you need to get everything up the hill. So we would start off by taking a load up the hill, caching some equipment, coming back down, then the next day going up the mountain past our cache of stored equipment, foods, up to higher camps, spend the night there, then we'd have an active rest day and descend down to the cache, pick up the cache and pull it up to the camp. And that was a rest day.
But presumably, would that have then been repeated all the way up towards the high camp?
Yeah, that was repeated all the way up to high camp. So all the time we were just pushing up the mountain very steadily, but we weren't gaining huge amounts of height every day, so it really helped aid acclimatisation for us. Now,
last night, Bob, when you stayed over at my house in Mid Wales, we looked through the photographs, and I think it was on Denali, we came across a photograph of a guy carrying a very unusual extra piece of kit.
Yeah, there's you meet all sorts of characters on these mountains, and this gentleman had decided to carry up his own blow-up doll, and he said to us that as he spent the time on the mountain, every day that went by, she got prettier and prettier, and her breasts got harder and harder.
Well, we'll probably include the photograph of her, because you got a cracking photograph of that person carrying up their little toy with them. But to come back to the mountain, Bob, can you sort of describe the route that you took and the various camps that you stayed at?
Yeah, we followed the normal route, the West Buttress up Denali. So we started off from the Calheatna Glacier, where the plane landed at about 7,000 feet. And the first day of mountaineering was carrying absolutely all of our equipment over, I think it was about 11 or 12 kilometres to a height of about 7,300 feet, just a little bit higher, but we had to descend and then regain height to take us to the base of Ski Hill. And then from the base of Ski Hill, that's when we started do a load carry up, come down, and then push on to the next camp. So from the base of Ski Hill, which is about 7,200 feet, we proceeded up to another camp at 11,000 feet, then progressed up to 14,000 feet. The ascent up to the 14,000 camp took us round the notorious Windy Corner, which is notorious for being windy, and hence its name, and is also subject to quite frequent rock falls down over that region, so you're constantly looking out for any signs of, is the rock's going to go hurtling past me and kill me. And then from 14,000 camp, that's your last point for what we considered luxury, which was the throne, which is a toilet seat based on some plywood, which is neatly positioned over a crevasse. So that was a bit of luxury for us at 14,000 camp. And from 14,000 camp, above that, you've got the main head wall of Denali, which is about a 45-50 degree ice slope that has got fixed lines on it, and you use that to access the main normal tourist route up to the next camp is 17,200 feet. So we had to do a load carry up the fixed lines on this very steep ice, and then drop off our equipment there, drop back down to 14,000 camp, and then the next day push on up. And we collected all of the gear we'd cached and carried that up to 17,200 foot camp. And we then had a rest day because we needed one.
Can you? Is it possible to describe what the feelings of sort of physical exertion are when you're doing things like that? Because those load carries and the environment that you're doing it in, it's so alien to most people, and It's just the physical exertion when I think of it. I just can't. I can't sort of imagine it.
Well, to do any of these sorts of high mountains, I think you need to be a little bit mental at times, and it's all about your mental attitude to the load carries. It's a case of, if you've trained before, you've been used to carrying heavy loads, and the more heavy loads you carry, the easier it is. But it is definitely not easy by any manner of means. It is. If you want to try what it's like at home, just put a 30 kilo rucksack on your back, just fill it with water and try walking up a hill, and you begin to experience what we feel at altitude. But the other thing is, we're also going quite slow at altitude because of the reduced oxygen levels, and we walk at a very, very slow pace because we're trying not to get too breathless, try and remain well oxygenated, so we don't develop altitude sickness. But it's hard work, and at times it can be quite boring. It's one foot in front of the other, and you'll quite often see photos of people wearing iPods in one ear just to help pass the time. It's long days, and it's hard graft.
So the route that led up to High Camp, as you said, you have, I think the description that you give, that the bit that I've read is active rest days, which is sounds hard work in itself, really.
Yeah.
But the route description that you gave, that sort of led up towards the High Camp, isn't it?
Yeah.
How many days would that be from base camp?
We got up to the 17,000 camp level after about 10 days, around about that period of time, so fairly rapidly. But prior to getting there, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to proceed up to there, because I developed a throat infection, which somebody else had picked up on the plane, and I wasn't in that good health, and mentally I was struggling a bit with the mountain because I wasn't feeling well, and but I persevered.
And what about the summit bid?
Yeah, the summit bid from 17,000 camp, you need to have a good weather window to go for it, and we were unsuccessful on our first summit bid. It was marginal conditions. The forecast was that the winds would drop and we should get an opportunity, and the mountain should clear. So we went on the off chance that the weather was right. In some ways we viewed it as additional acclimatisation anyway. So from 17,000 camp we proceeded up towards the Denali Pass, going along a notorious section that's known as the Autobahn. It's known as the Autobahn because a couple of Germans took the quick way down and unfortunately died. So, you know, really the names help put the mountain in perspective for you. But we sort of got about 3/4 of the way up the Autobahn, and the conditions were not improving, so we just headed back down to 17,000 camp to sit it out for another couple of days before then making our summit bid.
But on that initial summit bid, Bob, how long would you be between the 17,000 camp trying to reach the summit and then sort of abandoning it on the first attempt and getting back down to camp?
It's a round trip. It was probably about 6 hours of effort.
It's a big day, isn't it? Just for that.
Yeah, it was a big day, but good acclimatisation, and it also gave us some familiarisation with the route and the conditions.
So what about the second attempt?
The second attempt was on the 1st of June 2010. The forecast was looking reasonable, and we set off straight up the Autobahn. We were experienced with that section, so we made reasonable time up it to Denali Pass, and it's surprising where the hours go. You know, you don't really have a concept of time, especially in Alaska, because it's 24 hours daylight at that time of year. And as we were going up, it was definitely noticeably getting colder and colder. And you might see in the photographs there was icicles growing out my nose cone at one point, and progressively as we go up the mountain you'll see the photos show more and more clothing come on. So in terms of the mountain, it's a big day doing your summit attempt. In total we took about 14.5 hours from 17,000 camp to the summit and back down. and at that altitude things take time, and I always remember pulling up onto the bit of the mountain that's called the football field. It's a nice flat area, you could play football in if you wanted, and at the end of the football field you just see rising above you a bit of the mountain they call Pig Hill, and believe me, it's a pig to go up. And we left our rucksacks on the football pitch and had a good drink of water, get some nutrients in us. Then we proceeded without our rucksacks for the summit because we had everything on anyway. The rucksacks were just additional weight. So with the camera in our pocket, we just continued up Pig Hill and proceeded along the summit ridge. As we reached the summit ridge, the weather conditions were beginning to deteriorate, and it clouded in, we couldn't see the summit ridge, and the wind was beginning to pick up, and we were making quite slow progress, and we were roped up with an assistant guide, and he said that if we haven't summited in the next 5 minutes we're turning round. And about, I think it was 4.5 minutes, we reached the summit, and conditions were really poor. My thermometer was off scale, it was below -30, the wind had picked up 20 mile an hour or something, so wind chill was down about -50 degrees C-ish. And we didn't want to hang around there. It was right, we've touched the top, we're getting out of here. I was the only person in our group to take any photographs at the summit, and the assistant guide told me off for taking the photos because on the summit bed I had 3 layers of gloves on with chemical hand warmers inside. I took my outer set of gloves off, so I had some dexterity to take a couple of quick snaps, including a self-portrait shot, that's me at the summit, and quickly put my glove back on. But in those sort of temperatures, even with 2 sets of gloves on, you can develop frostbite quite rapidly. But thankfully, as you can see, my fingers are fine. And we then proceeded to get down the hill as quickly as we could. I think we summited about 7:30 at night, but in 24-hour daylight it doesn't make any difference. We didn't need a head torch.
So the end of the summit day, was that back down to the high camp?
Yeah, the end of the summit day was down to high camp at 17,200 feet. So still higher than a lot of mountains in the world. You're still at the cruising height of some UK internal flights, and you know that's a nice safe place for us and a nice warm tent.
Now, you were saying, Bob, that's a 14.5-hour day.
Yeah.
Again, physically, what do you feel like? It must be a fantastic sense of achievement to reach the summit, but 14.5 hours at that altitude, what are you like when you get back to the high camp?
Absolutely knackered. Yeah, it's a major undertaking doing any of these mountains, and you've got a lot of emotion when you reach the summit, but when you reach summit you're only halfway up. You need to get back down safely, and you need your wits about you throughout, and just the load carry back out from the mountain is still tough going. Even though gravity's on your side, you've still got to be very careful. And all the way down from high camp at 17,200 feet, we no longer did sort of staging of caches. We carried the lot out with us. Thankfully we'd eaten most of the food, but we just sort of went for straight plod out, and we had a weather forecast, sort of long-term forecast from 17,000 camp, and the weather conditions were deteriorating. So if we wanted out from the mountain quickly, we had to get down to the Kahina Glacier pretty rapidly to be able to catch a flight. So the day after summiting, we proceeded down the fixed ropes to 14,000 camp, and then the next day we made a really early start, 4 or 5 in the morning, and we pushed all the way out to the Kahina Glacier. Bear in mind we'd had sort of 2 or 3 camps to get there on the way in. We pushed the entire distance out, carrying everything, and as we rounded the corner to the landing area, we saw planes taking off, and we spoke with the person who organised the flight, and there was 2 planes on the way in to collect us at the landing area, and the weather conditions changed at the mountain pass. They had to cross over. The planes turned round. You were that close to getting out for a beer. But we then spent another couple of days, 2 or 3 days, just waiting out for the weather to improve. But we were down and safe in our tents, and we could just chill out and relax.
So presumably then, when the window did come about, the plane came in,
yeah,
took you out.
Yeah, we were on one of the first planes out from Alaska, out of Denali, and before even having a shower, we were all straight into the pub for a well-earned beer.
Well, again, Bob, it's these interviews that we're doing. It's fascinating for me to hear about your experiences on some of the highest mountains in the world and the highest mountain in each of the world's continents. And it's been tremendous meeting you again, and absolutely fascinating listening to your encounter with Denali. But before we close off, any final thoughts on Denali?
It was a big mountain, and it taught me a lot about high altitude mountaineering and the extreme cold. But one of the things I will need to be careful of in the future is maybe not having too many beers in Anchorage, Alaska, because I ended up on a flight to Japan unexpectedly and quickly nipped up Mount Fuji on the way home.
Well, that sounds good. Well, Bob, many thanks again, and it's been great to hear about your experiences with Denali. So, Bob Kerr, many thanks.
Thanks, Myrddyn.